All right, morning, guys. I'm going to attempt to give these notes from my front porch. We got all sorts of construction going on around here, so if you hear some hammering, knocking, sawing, hopefully it won't be too loud and you can hear me over it. Plus, the neighbor's mowing, so hopefully that won't be too loud as well. But we're going to go ahead and continue our notes today for chapter 16. We'll be dealing with challenges to slavery. We started talking about that yesterday and how slavery had become the major issue when it came to the United States and the government, and just the problems between slave and free states. We talked about bleeding Kansas and how members of both groups had gone into the Kansas territory trying to establish governments, and basically two territorial governments had been set up. It turns violent, and it's given the name Bleeding Kansas. We talked about how a lot of historians believe that to be the actual start of the Civil War. Okay, we're going to continue on with talking about some challenges to slavery. In dealing with the issue of slavery, this is going to lead to the breakdown of certain political parties. It's also going to lead to the formation of new political parties. We'll talk about all of those as we go through here. Okay. The Whig Party is basically dissolved. A lot of the anti-slavery Whigs will leave. They're going to be so divided over slavery that their party will just kind of fall apart. So some former Whigs, members of the Free Soil Party that we talked about in the last section, and also a few anti-slavery Democrats are going to all come together, and they're going to reform what was called the Republican Party. Okay, this is the same Republican Party that we have today. They're actually going to win control of the House of Representatives in 1854, and I'll show a map here in just a second. But after the formation of this Republican Party, we're going to see just how the division in the United States and where most party members are located. And after the formation of the Republican Party, it really starts to become clear that the North is largely Republican, and the South is largely Democrat. And we'll see that in the next several elections as we go on. Excuse me. Dealing with the election of 1856, the Republican Party is going to choose John C. Fremont. Like I said, the Whig Party is basically dissolved. They won't have a candidate. So the Republicans will choose John C. Fremont. They'll use the slogan, kind of like the Free Soil Party slogan, which was free soil, free speech, free labor, free men. Well, the campaign now turns to free soil, free speech, and Fremont, because of his last name. Okay, so they're going to nominate Fremont. Democrats will nominate a man named James Buchanan. And then there's actually a third candidate from the Know Nothing Party, or the American Party, and that was former President Millard Fillmore. He's actually going to be a third candidate. He's not going to play much of a role in the election of 1856. That's actually Fremont right there, and then Buchanan and Millard Fillmore, who had been president after Zachary Taylor had died, but never won an election as becoming president of the United States. Okay, so the election of 1856, you can see the division. Fremont is going to take 11 of the 16 free states. Buchanan will take, obviously, the slave states. He's actually going to carry a couple of the free states as well. Some of the free states were not a huge advocate of Fremont. They did not think he'd do a very good job, and so they're going to cast their votes for James Buchanan. Fillmore will win one state, and that's the state of Delaware or Maryland. That's the only electoral votes he'll get. But Buchanan will win by winning 174 electoral votes to Fremont's 114. So he will be elected president in 1856, where he'll serve one term. Next, we're going to talk about the Dred Scott decision. This is one of those landmark Supreme Court cases. We've talked about several Supreme Court cases in the past chapters. Marbury versus Madison, things like that. Here's another landmark court case when it comes to the Supreme Court, and it just so happens that it's dealing with slavery. Okay, Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri. Well, his slaveholder will move and takes Dred Scott with him when he moves to Illinois. Just one second, because I think I'm fixing to sneeze. Oh, went away. Okay. So, Dred Scott, slaveholder, his master will take him to Illinois, which is a free state. From there, they will move to the Wisconsin Territory, which was part of the Northwest Territory. Slavery was banned there as well. Later, they will move back to Missouri, but he'll live in free territory or a free state for about 11 years. Okay? So once they move back to Missouri, Dred Scott is going to try to sue this slaveholder because he's been living in free territory for so long. He now believes that he should be a free man. Okay? It's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court in this Dred Scott versus Sanford court case. The Supreme Court justice at the time was a man named Roger Taney. Okay? And he's basically going to rule in favor of Sanford because he says that Dred Scott, even though he had lived in free territory for so long, is a slave. Slaves are property. Slaves don't have the same rights as free individuals. So because he is a slave, he doesn't even have the right to take this case to court. Okay? So Taney's basically going to come out and say that the Constitution protects slavery. Okay, the things that come up, he says the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. He says that the idea of popular sovereignty is unconstitutional. People don't have the right to do those things because it's dealing with property. And the Fifth Amendment protects our property without due process. And so in this landmark case, he's basically saying Dred Scott doesn't have the right to sue because he is considered property, and the Constitution protects our property. Therefore, the Constitution protects slavery. Well, the slave states are just overjoyed by this decision. This is their belief. This is their way of life. They say, okay, finally the Supreme Court has decided and let everybody know slavery is protected by the Constitution. Well, the free states, anti-slavery protesters are furious. They say this is one of the worst decisions by a Supreme Court justice in the history of the United States. So again, it just adds fuel to these flames that are growing over the issue of slavery. And that's a picture of Dred Scott there. In 1858, there's going to be a Senate race in the state of Illinois. It's going to become the center of national attention. The senator for Illinois, one of the senators for Illinois at the time, was Stephen Douglas. He was a Democratic candidate, or he was a Democratic senator at the time. Well, he's going to be run against by a young man named Abraham Lincoln. It's one of the first times we see Lincoln in politics. He's actually running for the office of Illinois Senate as well. When it comes to their campaigns, Lincoln is going to challenge Douglas to a series of debates, these famous Lincoln-Douglas debates, as they're called. And basically, they're all dealing with the issue of slavery. Douglas is reluctant to hold these debates because I don't know 100%, but I think Lincoln was known as a very good public speaker at this point in time. He was kind of reluctant to go into these debates against Lincoln. When it came to these debates, Lincoln basically asks Douglas, do states and territories have the right of popular sovereignty, meaning the people decide when it comes to the issue of slavery? And Douglas says, yes, the states and territories do have that. They have that right. Popular sovereignty should be allowed. Well, he's going to lose a lot of support in the South because, remember, the Supreme Court, Taney, had decided that popular sovereignty was unconstitutional. So by Douglas saying they do have that right, he's going to lose a lot of that, a lot of support in the South, which they were looking at Douglas as a candidate for president in the 1860 presidential race. Lincoln will lose the election, this Senate election. It's a very slim margin. Like I said, he is going to make a name for himself and the Republican Party, so much so that they will eventually nominate him for president in the next couple of years. Okay, but these debates, these Lincoln Douglas debates, basically put Lincoln on the map and showed a lot of people what he was capable of doing. Now, the South saw these debates and the things that were going on, abolitionism. They are worried about what's going on. One of the things that kind of put what I'm trying to say, again, it just made the South realize that the North was trying to do away with slavery, was called John Brown's Raid. If you remember, we talked about John Brown. We talked about Bleeding Kansas. But John Brown was a abolitionist who believed that God had wanted him to punish the wicked. And he believed that slavery was this wicked institution. He believed that an angel had come and told him to go and punish these wicked individuals. And that was his duty as a Christian to do this. So he's going to gather together a group of men, and he's going to try to seize the arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His goal is to go in, take the arsenal, take the weapons, give those weapons to slaves in the area, and start a rebellion there in Virginia. Well, that rebellion is going to be put down by federal troops led by a man that we'll talk a whole lot more about in the next chapter, Robert E. Lee. Also, some citizens of Harper's Ferry will join the federal troops, the militia, and they'll put down this rebellion. Brown's sons are actually killed when the federal troops will come in. Brown is taken, he's sentenced to death, and he will be hanged because of this rebellion that he has started. But this raid by John Brown really just proves to the Southerners, or so they think, that Northerners are trying to deliberately murder slaveholders. And so again, just another stepping stone and more fuel to the fire that's pushing the anti-slavery and the pro-slavery states further and further apart. All right, so there's your notes on section 2. Make sure you copy those down. Hang on to those because you will be able to use those on your test. And that will be on Friday.